Situation in Venezuela. Obviously, we are seeing the Venezuelan people strive to get a government that they control.
Donald Trump is extremely popular. We just did a whole segment on that. But if Trump is so popular, why are these races so close?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the answer is that there's a difference between
an authoritarian military regime that in turn is controlled by Cubans and other forces external to Venezuela. This is obviously a very serious situation. The president has been monitoring
Trump-motivated voters and the traditional Republican Party. What I mean by that is that Donald Trump has brought in lots of new voters into the political process. For example, he won Hispanic men nationwide.
In the next 8 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why Trump's Florida support is crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. We'll dig into the secret polling data his own team is hiding, the Venezuelan voter revolt, and why Republicans are panicking about districts they've held for decades. Stick around to the end where I'll reveal what this means for Election Day, including the shocking numbers from early voting that have GOP strategists reaching for the Pepto-Bismol and frantically calling their bosses. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. Ever notice how Trump's team suddenly got real quiet about Florida? You know, the state where Trump spends half his life playing golf and the other half complaining about immigrants?
I'm in it throughout the day. As have his advisors. We see this now as a potentially dispositive moment in the efforts of the Venezuelan people to regain their freedom.
And actually what happens when President Donald J. Trump is not on the ballot. If we go back in time with President Obama, you know, we had that Obama appeal that did not, voters don't always transfer. And I can tell you that as somebody who...
There have been a lot of speculation, comment in the media about what's happening in Venezuela. We think it's still very important for key figures in the regime.
Yeah, you know, look, it's a great point. You think about Barack Obama, incredible campaigner for himself, not for others. Same with Donald Trump. 2018 midterms, we saw what happened in the special elections in the Senate down in Georgia. 2021, the 2022 midterms, I could go on.
Yeah, that Florida. Well, there's a reason his campaign stopped bragging about their so-called Florida fortress. And it's not because they're being humble all of a sudden. Trump's internal polling, the numbers they don't want you to see, is making his team sweat through their MAGA hats. The panic is so real that his pollster Fabio, yes, that's actually his name, like the romance novel cover model but for polling data, delivered some seriously bad news from the Sunshine State. And boy, did it set off alarm bells. The situation got so dire that Trump's team yanked Elise Stefanik's nomination in what should have been a safe New York district. When you're pulling resources from strong Trump territory 5 days before an election, you're not making a small adjustment. You're frantically trying to stop the bleeding. It's like canceling your vacation because you just noticed your house is on fire. The numbers from Florida's 6th congressional district are particularly shocking. Democratic candidate Josh Weil is actually leading by 3 to 4 points, possibly more, in what should be MAGA country. This district was supposed to be Trump's playground, not a battleground. The Republican candidate is sitting at a measly 41% support. As Weil himself pointed out, they'd need a 10-point margin of error just to squeak past 50%. That's not a statistical hiccup, that's a statistical heart attack, and Trump's team is desperately trying to hide these numbers while simultaneously scrambling to shore up support. It's like watching someone pretend their pants aren't on fire while frantically looking for a water bucket. This explains the sudden last-minute rallies in places Trump should have locked up months ago. You don't send the big man himself to districts you've already won. You send him to places where you're losing. What's especially telling is how Republican resources are flooding into traditionally safe districts. Campaign cash, staff, advertisements, all being diverted to areas that should never have been in question. When a presidential campaign starts treating former strongholds like toss-ups, it's not strategy, it's survival mode. The most alarming part for Team Trump, the data shows that Republican voters who supported him in 2016 and 2020 are having serious second thoughts. These aren't Democrats or independents. These are folks who wore the red hats, put up the yard signs, and voted for Trump twice. Now they're looking at a third round and thinking, maybe not this time. It's like watching a restaurant lose its regular customers. The occasional tourist might still show up, but when the locals stop coming, you know something's seriously wrong with the menu. Except in this case, the special of the day is more Trump, and even loyal customers are sending it back to the kitchen. The campaign's attempt to hide these numbers tells us everything. If the polls were good, Trump would be tweeting them hourly in all caps. Instead, his team is playing pretend, maintaining public confidence while privately freaking out. It's the political equivalent of saying this is fine while sitting in a room engulfed in flames. Trump's sudden focus on Florida is a dead giveaway. You don't frantically reinforce your fortress unless you know the walls are crumbling. These last-minute efforts aren't signs of strength, they're emergency measures. When you're deploying your biggest campaign weapons to defend territory you thought was secure, you're not expanding your map, you're trying to prevent it from shrinking. The polling data reveals something Trump never expected. Florida voters are abandoning him at rates that could flip previously safe districts. His own pollsters are hitting the panic button because the numbers don't lie, even when their boss does. The famous Trump base, the one he bragged couldn't be broken, is showing cracks wider than Mar-a-Lago's foundation. This isn't normal election uncertainty. This is a campaign realizing their Florida firewall might actually be made of paper. When a district that should be solidly red is leaning blue just days before an election, somebody in Trump Tower is definitely screaming at interns and throwing fast food wrappers. That paper firewall in Florida just got soaked in gasoline when Elon Musk decided to call Social Security a Ponzi scheme. Did Trump's team forget that Florida has more retirees depending on those monthly checks than almost anywhere else in America? It's like insulting shuffleboard in a retirement community, except this blunder might cost them an entire election. Florida isn't just a vacation spot with nice beaches and weird news stories. It's basically America's retirement capital. We're talking about millions of seniors who wake up every morning, check their mailboxes, and count on those Social Security checks to pay for everything from medication to groceries. These aren't just voters, they're voters with nothing but time on their hands to worry about whether the guy they vote for might take away the money they live on. So when billionaire Elon Musk, standing right next to Trump at a campaign event, calls their financial lifeline a Ponzi scheme, you better believe Florida's seniors noticed. Nothing gets a retiree's blood pressure up faster than threatening the check that keeps their lights on. And Trump, instead of running away from those comments as fast as his weird little shoes could carry him, just stood there nodding like Musk was talking about the weather. The backlash has been swift. Reports from all across the state show seniors are absolutely pissed about this. These are people who voted Republican their entire lives, who stuck with Trump through scandal after scandal, but are now openly questioning if they can trust him with their financial future. When you've got fixed income voters worrying if their next Social Security check will come through, you've got a political disaster on your hands. Take the Villages, that massive retirement community that's been a Trump stronghold since forever. Rumor has it that the golf cart parades are looking a bit thin these days. Local reporters are finding seniors there who've never questioned their support for Trump before suddenly getting real interested in what that Harris lady has to say about protecting their benefits. For the first time, they're asking questions like, if Trump's best buddy thinks my retirement money is a scam, what does Trump really think? Meanwhile, Josh Weil, the Democratic candidate who's giving Republicans nightmares in what should be a safe district, isn't letting this golden opportunity slip away. He's laser focused on telling seniors he'll protect Social Security and Medicare while painting his opponent Randy Fine and Trump as threats to these programs. Every campaign ad, every speech, every door knock now hammers home one message: I'll protect your benefits. They won't. Trump's team is scrambling to do damage control, but they've backed themselves into a corner. On one hand, they're promising to slash government spending to fix the deficit. On the other hand, they're swearing they won't touch entitlements. The problem: Florida seniors have been around long enough to know when someone's trying to sell them oceanfront property in Arizona. They've heard this song and dance before, and they're not buying the confusing double talk this time. What makes this whole situation even more delicious is that Trump can't afford to lose even a small percentage of senior voters. These are his people. They're the ones who show up to vote no matter what, who forward those weird conspiracy theory emails, who actually still watch cable news. In a state where elections are decided by razor-thin margins, having reliable senior citizens suddenly questioning their loyalty is a political nightmare. The anxiety among seniors is palpable. Many are openly expressing their fears about the future of programs they depend on. It's not just about the politics for them, it's about survival. When you're living on a fixed income in a state with rising housing costs and healthcare expenses, threats to Social Security aren't abstract policy debates. They're threats to your ability to eat and keep a roof over your head. The irony here is thick enough to spread on toast. After years of carefully cultivating this senior vote, Trump let his billionaire buddy Trash talk the very program keeping his supporters afloat. It's like watching someone saw off the branch they're sitting on, then being surprised when they fall out of the tree. Republican strategists are privately pulling their hair out. Florida was supposed to be Trump's safety net. It's where he lives, for crying out loud. Now they're watching senior citizens, the most reliable Republican voting bloc since forever, suddenly start to wobble because their candidate couldn't be bothered to defend the program that keeps them alive. And just when Trump thought his Florida problems couldn't get worse, he managed to betray the very people who once saw him as their savior from dictatorship. The Venezuelan community in Florida, who once waved Trump flags with pride, are now organizing against him faster than you can say deportation nightmare. Let's rewind a bit. Florida's Venezuelan community used to love Trump, like seriously love him. They cheered when he talked tough about Maduro, the dictator back home who turned their country into an economic disaster zone. They believed Trump's sanctions and diplomatic pressure would finally topple the regime that forced them to flee in the first place. In their eyes, Trump was the strong man who would stand up to the bully who took everything from them. Then came the betrayal that nobody saw coming. Trump's administration pulled the rug out from under them by revoking temporary protected status for Venezuelans. This wasn't just some minor policy tweak buried in the back pages of a government website. This was a direct threat to thousands of Venezuelan families who had built new lives in Florida, suddenly leaving them in terrifying legal limbo. I cheered Trump's election because of his tough stance on the Venezuelan government, one Venezuelan immigrant explained, but now I'm scared my son could be deported. That's the sound of a voter who won't be showing up at a Trump rally anytime soon. The betrayal cuts deeper because it's personal. These aren't just abstract policy disagreements. We're talking about mothers fearing their children could be sent back to a country in collapse, fathers wondering if their family will be torn apart, grandparents who finally felt safe suddenly realizing the politician they trusted might be the one to destroy their American dream. The impact is rippling through Florida's Venezuelan communities. Those Venezuelans for Trump signs that used to dot neighborhoods from Miami-Dade to Orlando, they're disappearing faster than toilet paper did back in Caracas. Community gatherings that once featured enthusiastic discussions about Trump's Venezuela policy have transformed into strategy sessions about protecting families from potential deportation. What's really got Trump's team sweating is what's happening at the polls. Volusia County, which has a significant Venezuelan population, is seeing something that hasn't happened in 3 decades. More Democrats voting than Republicans during early voting. That's right. For the first time in 30 years, Democrats outnumbered Republicans on the first day of early voting. That's not a political hiccup, that's a seismic shift in voting patterns. Democratic organizers who used to get doors slammed in their faces in Venezuelan neighborhoods are now finding people eager to talk. The conversations are changing from "Trump will save Venezuela" to "Will Harris protect my family from deportation?" Campaign volunteers report Venezuelan Americans who have never voted before are showing up to the polls, driven by fear of what another Trump term might mean for their immigration status. The panic in Trump's camp is showing. They're scrambling to do damage control, sending Spanish-speaking surrogates into Venezuelan communities with mixed messages about his immigration plans. But it's a tough sell when you've already threatened to deport someone's cousin. One Trump surrogate actually tried arguing that the revocation of TPS was actually good for Venezuelans because it would somehow put more pressure on Maduro. That's like telling someone you're taking away their umbrella to motivate the rain to stop. Local Spanish language media that once gave Trump favorable coverage are now running story after story featuring heartbroken Venezuelan families worried about their future. The shift in tone is unmistakable, from treating Trump as Venezuela's potential savior to portraying him as yet another threat to their security. What makes this voter revolt so dangerous for Trump is that Florida's Venezuelan community is concentrated in critical areas. Their votes could tip the scales in a state where elections are often decided by razor-thin margins. When you're talking about a state that was decided by just over 3 percentage points in 2020, every community matters, especially one that used to be in your corner and is now organized organizing against you. Harris's campaign has recognized this opportunity, sending multiple surrogates to Venezuelan community events and emphasizing her commitment to protecting TPS. They're not subtle about it either. Campaign materials specifically highlight Trump's threat to Venezuelan families and contrast it with Harris's immigration proposals. So there you have it, folks. The perfect Florida storm. Trump's losing his pollsters' confidence, his senior citizen fan club, and now the Venezuelan voters he thought were in the bag. This isn't just some blip on the radar. It's a full-blown voter rebellion happening right before our eyes. Will this Florida flip-flop cost Trump the whole election? Who knows? But one thing's crystal clear. Trump's grip on the Sunshine State is slipping faster than his spray tan in a Florida thunderstorm. Whatever happens tomorrow, Florida's political landscape has shifted, and Grumpy Trumpy might just have to face a new reality in his adopted home state.